Most of the speakers have talked about this need to move away from the terminology of the book, and I completely understand what you're talking about. But I am curious if you aren't missing an opportunity. I mean, it does seem to me that, to some extent, just as your businesses are evolving to new models, the notion of the book is evolving as well. It seems that consumers have been pretty flexible in really accepting as a book anything the publishers tell them is a book. I mean, a novel by John Updike is considered a book the same as Thin Thighs in 30 Days. I mean, most people will take them both as books, and as it's also a term that people understand to mean relevant content. So while I completely understand the need to differentiate, evolve from the legacy that you all depend on, I am curious how you discuss this, say, with your partners, say, retailers. Now, I don't know if I made a statement or asked you a question, but I am curious, is the book, are you missing an opportunity by this notion that we've got to somehow leave the baggage of the book behind?
I guess I'll start, since I'm probably the one who took the most aggressive stance on that. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Today we are firm believers in the book. It is a core part of our business. The point I was trying to make is, I think by thinking exclusively in that language, that we miss the opportunity to think more broadly about how to deliver ideas to consumers. And I don't think that holds firm across all publishers. I think that there are publishers who of a certain type, call us in service-oriented publishers, where Harvard Business Review, we perform a service to our readers. We go out and find what we consider to be the most important new ideas in business, and we try to translate them for our users in a way that's ultimately as engaging and useful as possible. For us, the world beyond the print book opens up a world of possibilities to serve our consumers in ways we could have never done in print. And so the point I was really trying to make is we need to, just as we need to respect the fact that books are a tried and true model, and our customers understand them and love them, if we think exclusively in the language of print, we're going to hold back innovation.
My point is that I think consumers are starting to accept that books don't exactly mean print anymore.
Yeah,
Right,
I agree.
Your question really is, what's the definition of a book? And I'm inclined to agree with you that a book is content. It doesn't matter what the form is.
And I think the markets out there are starting to understand that, and that perhaps we need to be talking about how this thing is changing, just as we're doing in these conferences, but to your customers. So sorry.
I think that's an entirely fair point. I mean, and I'm not so sure that we're really that far apart. What you're saying is the book can be whatever we want it to be. I'm saying I like thinking beyond the book because the book leads people to a certain definition. I think ultimately the spirit is the same.
Right. If you add the word printed, which you did a couple of times, then it's real clear.
Right. Well, and that's its legacy.
Yeah.
I think there are also some. One, I would say that we here probably don't get to control what words are being applied to our new products. Sometimes much to our frustration. But I think you see that there are different levels of tolerance and things that are tolerated and are not tolerated. And this is in particular why, if you see when Amazon launched their short programs, they were very clear to sort of message to consumers, hey, these aren't eBooks. These are, what do they call them, singles, Kindle singles. And we've been working on our own ebook-only short content at Oxford. This has been something that we've been very aware of. Whether we think they should be considered ebooks or not, and in our systems they're recognized as ebooks, and et cetera, we want to be very clear when we message these products going out to consumers that's like, hey, you're getting short content here, so don't be angry that what you're buying is 5,000 words. Be aware that what you're buying is 5,000 words. And so I think it's a really evolving landscape, and it's something where we are probably going to have to follow more than lead.
And I think what consumers are saying is, hey, these are short ebooks.
and that's fine if that's
exactly.
If that's what it
I
ends
think
up
that's perfectly fine.
But I think if you look back at short content that was released on somewhere like Amazon Kindle Store before they started this singles program, you'll see a lot of negative reviews for people saying like, I paid $3 for this and it's really short and I'm really angry about that, right? Sort of, like, okay, because you weren't really, the idea of this being short content wasn't conveyed to you. It was, you were just thinking it was an ebook, and you have some sort of a concept in your head that an ebook takes approximately however long it takes to read, or it has approximately however much content.
Yeah, I mean, you touch on that. There's a commercial advantage to either aggressively redefining what a book means or using other language, because it resets customers' expectations about not just how long it is or what's in it, but how much they will pay for it.
Exactly.
I have a question. This is Steve Gary with TE Touch Solutions. I want to check first, Mr. Michaelman, I think you had a slide that had a bullet that said ebook adds cost and time. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that kind of surprised me, because I think of this as the last hop at which you become analog versus digital. And that kind of surprised me, because when you go to a digital medium, you move out, you tear out all of the analog part of the book. I would see that as a cost savings against a charge for the expenditure.
Long term, it absolutely is. I didn't speak to that point, so I didn't get to say that one. That is very much a today. That is a today point of view. Today, and I'll come back to the notion that when your operations are built primarily to create print books, creating ebooks is an incremental exercise. In the long term, as we remake our systems to be digital first, that will no longer be the case.
Okay, so then I would have another point. It's very similar to what happened with Napster in the music industry and tearing out the infrastructure of LPs, the whole album for the one song, so to speak.
Or going through the process of creating an analog recording only to make it digital later. To some degree, that's where we are now.
Yeah, I was going to say something, and now I've completely forgotten what it was. Oh, I was going to say, right. One of the things that we see being necessary for a long time as well is coming out with this backlist content. Sorry, I'm not close enough to the mic. Our backlist content, and that's something that's always actually, it's more expensive for us now to produce a backlist ebook. Because one, we may not have any sort of digital files, we may have to start with a print book. Two, we're going to have to go back to the author's estate and try to clear rights. There are all sorts of greater costs associated with coming out with those backlist titles, and those costs are probably about where they're going to be. I don't really see those getting any less over time, but yeah, with the new titles, definitely.
I was just going to make a comment maybe to the last two questions. We actually have a pretty large business that does summaries of books. So it's kind of like remember those yellow Cliff Note type books that you might have seen. But we have those sorts of things for business books, for executives that don't have time to read, say, that 300-page book about this new management technique, or as well as kind of old literature, as well as for the medical market. Same thing, busy doctor probably doesn't have time to really read an entire book or the 7 journals that kind of pertain to their market. So maybe over time that'll go away, as we kind of looked at more sort of bite-sized or smaller targeted content, but still a very thriving business given today's legacy.
Michael with Good eReader. I have a question about, applicable to everybody there. Because you all focus on academia, nonfiction, you probably are aware that there's a lot of talk in the ebook sphere about agency pricing, where publishers will determine the price of the books, and this takes into account royalties to the author and things like that. How do you guys manage the pricing of your content for the end user or to the institutions? Do you set the price, or how does the price, how do you guys determine the price for your content to either institutions or the end user?
Sure. Yeah, it's a very complex decision, and it really is different for us on a title-by-title basis. We have really fairly recently moved from a position where historically what we've done is price a print book, and then we later on, much later in the process, come up with an ebook price that was based on that print book price. And now what we do is come up with all the prices for all the products at the stage where we set the prices. Sorry, that's a bit obvious, but you know, we go through this sort of system that takes us through the various different stages, and they all have these code words or code numerals and things like this. The NT25 stage, and that's where we set the prices, and now we set all our prices there. So it really takes into account, you know, what is this intellectual property, and how many do we expect to sell, and which market are we trying to reach with this? And, you know, at Oxford, we do this really broad range of publishing where some of our books are almost the size of the sort of book that a trade house would do, probably not quite as large. And then some of them, you know, we're talking about very, very limited print runs. And so we have to factor in all of our costs. That was another development that we've done recently, is that we really hadn't incorporated consideration of ebook costs into the costs associated with intellectual property when we get started. It was really just the print costs, and then we'd sort of later on say, yeah, this makes sense as an ebook, so we're going to do it, and we'll later on try to reconcile that. So it really is sort of title by title and publishing division by publishing division. As to agency pricing, we don't participate in any agency pricing at the moment. That was really just a business decision. I mean, I know that there have been legal challenges. Our European business has also looked at the sort of the challenges under EU law about any sort of agency pricing. So at the moment, we set a digital list price, and then the account that's making the sale gets to determine the price at which the unit is sold, and then they pay us based on our digital list price.
I was going to say, I was almost going to go last because ours is sort of a little more complex. After they set their prices, and of course we have to then work with every individual publisher we work with to kind of then set the prices for the different uses of the different content. So it's very complex.
For our book business, it's really not any different than Oxford's. It's not an area of expertise of mine, but it begins with a print list price, and then there's a chain of events that happen. Amazon determines, you know, what they sell our books for. We do participate in some agency pricing. We generally just match prices as much as we can between digital outlets. For pricing for original digital content, digital-only content, our mobile content, it is highly unscientific. We're figuring it out. We tend to look for comps in the market and then experiment.
One of the trends that we're starting to see in the market, especially this would pertain to Oxford, not quite so sure how much this would be relevant to Harvard Business Review, but it could very well so affect its business, is the self-published authors. And Amazon has a list of, you know, $1 million selling self-published authors. And this is more pertinent to the trade business, say, than the institutional business of higher education. But as the self-published market evolves and Amazon gains more of the ebook market share and grows its presence, are you adapting to this model of self-published works and self-published authors, or are you resistant to this model?
How you mean in terms of how we look at them as competition?
Right. I mean, do you think you see this as becoming a big market opportunity that, you know, Oxford or Harvard Business Review could participate in to identify ways for people in the academic community or people within the author community to participate much more freely?
Well, one of the big things that Oxford offers, and I think any sort of established publisher offers, is the ability to review content and to put a sort of a to improve it, and to also put a sort of a stamp of approval on something. That for Oxford is particularly relevant in the academic market. There is a lot of brand recognition of Oxford as a publisher in the academic market. In the trade market, Oxford as a publisher is generally not really noticed on our trade books. Our trade books compete generally on title, author, subject matter, just as a Random House book would as well. But I think we feel very strongly that our trade book program always has to fit in with the core of our mission, which relates to that, how we build that brand in the academic market. So we feel that we play an absolutely critical role in the development of the intellectual property and the selection of the intellectual property. And so, while I don't think we can, we can't really do anything about self-published authors. It's always going to be an author's choice to go that route. We feel that we will always have a position. We will always have a strong competitive position against a self-published, against a program of self-published authors. And I think we will always have an attraction to the sort of authors that we've always worked with in the past.
I think for us there are two ways you can look at it. I think self-publishing presents a fantastic opportunity for publishers, including us, to find and discover talent. And I'm hugely in favor of this trend. Whether it's self-published books or self-published blogs, or any form of self-publishing, whether it's through Amazon into a book form or in another digital form, it presents a great opportunity to discover new authors and new talent. And we have discovered authors whom we have published through self-publishing, in this case, people who've had their own blogs, who have attracted huge followings. We have figured out why, because they're brilliant and have great ideas, and we have signed them. And I love this trend. I think it's great. As from kind of the traditional publishing point of view, we sell our brand as much as our authors. We are an unusual publisher in that our brand represents something to our customers. More so in the magazine than in books, but we aggressively use our brand along with our authors to sell our books. And our methodology of editorial creation is unusual in that we are often, we think of ourselves as co-creators with our authors, that we are aggressively involved editorially with the content we publish. So you kind of have also divergent things there. As a content creator, we see our role as a publisher as being very involved and as involving the brand and leveraging the brand. But we see self-publishing as a huge opportunity to discover talent.
I was just more or less going to confirm that point that from what we see in the academic space or the library space, that process of vetting content, having a reputation of a company behind that content speaks a lot. They always give the example of drives librarians and professors crazy that students still use Wikipedia, and reference blogs for some of their papers. And so to have sort of the peer-reviewed sort of process and production process is still very much going to be there.
More audience questions?